Hello, welcome to our 7th Winter Zoom Embroidery Series video, and this will be covering stitches learned for our floral sampler, our 4th class on the floral sampler. Before we jump in, I kind of want to talk about your sampler and the layout of your hoop. Originally, this was going to be our last floral sampler class. I am going to do one more because there's a really cool thing I want to show you next time. So you might be running out of room on your hoop. So today we're going to be doing this stitch here, this purple stitch. It can be laid out in a lot of different ways. You can lay it out as random little flowers here, or they can be flowers that sort of travel up a vine like this one. This was my practice hoop here. So you could do them sort of scattered in a row and then add any of our stem stitches that we've learned, not our stem stitches, our line stitches, including the stem stitch, you could put in here if you have a long skinny spot. And then I want you to leave room next week. We're going to learn one more stitch for making stems. And then also a really cool stitch for making leaves and petals where they stick up in the air like this. So just think about that. So if you don't have a lot of room on your hoop, if you were planning on having one more class, because that was the original plan, focus on these here. And then next week, you can just like add a random leaf with this stitch to something that you've already got, would be the idea. If you have room for 2 more flowers, that's great. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this stitch here. It doesn't have a name. Well, it might have a name, but I don't know the name because I learned how to do this stitch on a TikTok video, and I have scoured all of my embroidery books and the internet, and I can't find it named anywhere. So I'm calling it the Loop-Dee-Pen stitch, and that is because we are going to loop thread around a pen. So grab a pen. You're going to want one with like a smooth shaft here. You don't want to be working around the lid end, like a pencil with the metal bit and the eraser. You don't want that because we want to be able to drag those loops off of the pen easily. Someone in class last night named this stitch the tunnel stitch, which is actually a really more descriptive stitch, and you'll see why. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to use embroidery floss, all 6 strands. This stitch doesn't take a ton of thread, but it also doesn't matter if you run out of thread in the middle. You can always knot off and start again in the middle of the stitch. So depending on if you only want to do one for practice, you don't need much thread. If you want to do a few of these, go ahead and grab wrist to shoulder. So to get started, I've got a new hoop for us here. And I think that it's helpful to draw a little line where you want your little blossom to be, and this makes great leaves as well. So if you're going to do this orientation, you could be like, well, I want one here, and I want one here, and I want one here, and just draw those little lines for yourself. Or if you want to do the vine orientation, same thing. You can draw your vine and put those little lines in. So I would say these stitches that we're doing, you can compare it to the last digit of my pinky finger. It's a pretty small little stitch. You are going to cover up all of this line if you're using a pencil. If you are going to do the vine and you're using a pencil, don't draw your vine in because you'll find with this stitch that you may need to adjust where the vine goes. But let's go ahead and jump in. And I'm just going to work up here on a random line like that. I'm going to take my, oops, let me make this big for you. I always forget to do that. There we go. Okay, so I've got my little line. And let's say that my, this is going to be the top of my blossom, and then the stem will be down here. It's growing off the vine this way. But anyway, this is the top. I'm going to start at the top. And I'm going to come up at the top of my line, right on the line. And then I'm going to aim for just working my way down this line. It doesn't have to be perfect, so don't overthink it too much. We discovered last night in class that this can be a really meticulous stitch if you're really aiming for this line, but if you're off a little bit, it's just fine. So I'm going to put my pen in. I'm going to wrap my thread around the pin and go back down on my line. I'm just going to show you what that's going to look like here. So I'm going to go right next to where I came out, but my pen's going to be in there. Okay. So I can kind of roll my pen from side to side to see where I am, but I do want that loop to be nice and taut around my pen. So I want to keep some tension there. This stitch, it's also a really good idea to keep an eye on the back of your hoop. When I was practicing, I had a lot of, because we're coming in and out so close to each other as we work down this line, it's very easy to get caught up. So just keep an eye on the back of that so it doesn't get too crazy back there. So I've looped once around my pen. Now I'm going to come back up. I'm going to roll my pen over here so you can see. I'm going to come back up right next to where I came out. Okay, but like I said, I want that to be tight. And so because I rolled my pen, I kind of loosened that. So I'm just going to tighten it up as best I can. Okay. All right. And I'm just going to keep going. So now I'm going to loop around this way. Go back down right next to it. Again, don't worry too much about being exactly on your line. It's going to look cool no matter what. Now this stitch does take a little bit of practice, so don't get frustrated if your first couple of attempts look a little bit messy. It took me probably, I would say it took me 3 tries to really figure this one out. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep these kind of together on the pen, and I'm going to keep going. And I have found that 7 or 8 or 9 loops is a good way to go. I tried one with 4 and it wasn't enough. So you want to let's aim for 7 or 8 today on this. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because you don't need to watch me make 4 more loops, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so here I've got my 7 loops around the pen. I'm going to push those together, and I just want to show you the back. I've gotten pretty good at getting these little stitches all in a little line here. It's taken quite a bit of practice to do that. So if yours is a little bit all over the place, if yours is, I had one yesterday. I can't find it. Anyway, if yours is if your stitches are a little bit like, woo, like more like a treasure map, don't even worry about it. It's all good. So now I've got my 7 loops. I'm going to come back up as if I'm going to do an 8th loop, even though I'm not. So I'm pulling my needle up. I've got my thread pulled taut here. And now I'm going to very gently pull my pen out of the loops. Now, this is why we're calling it also the tunnel stitch. We've got a nice little tunnel of loops here. Okay. So try not to disturb your tunnel. You want to kind of keep these really nice and parallel with each other. Now, you also don't want to pull on this thread too tight, because if you pull on this, your first loop is going to get smaller and it's just going to keep going. And you want to keep these as close to the same size as possible. So remember, my top is up here. I just finished. I'm at the bottom of my tunnel. Now I'm going to run my needle through the tunnel. I'm not penetrating the fabric. I'm just coming through here. Okay. Now I'm going through my tunnel and I'm coming out the top. I'm going to pull my thread across the top so that my tail of my thread is like literally sitting on top of the tunnel now. I'm going to pull that backwards, and that is how I get my shape. And then I'm going to go into the fabric here. Oops. I'm just going to go underneath and tack. Okay. And this is how I get sort of a leaf shape with this. Okay, so I've got this little sort of gap in the middle where I can see the fabric underneath and my stitches underneath. Now this is where you can go in and you can add, I just went in with another color and added this little yellow straight stitch inside. I actually did a double straight stitch to get this nice little inside. I'm about to teach you the pistil stitch, which is this one, which is this little line with the little dot on the end, which is so cute for the insides of flowers. But if you want to make leaves, or if you don't want to use a second color, now that I've come underneath here and tacked this, all I have to do is come back up right in the middle. And I want to thank Deb for pointing this out last night, that if you don't want to use a second color, you don't have to. Okay, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to go in at the top. Okay, and now I've got this beautiful little leaf shape that I can use. And I'll just knot my thread off on the back and then go and start another one. I would definitely recommend knotting off on the back, cutting your thread off, re-knotting it, and starting again in a separate spot. Once you get really good at this stitch, go to town on just having your leaves connected to each other on the back on the same thread. But while you're practicing, you may find that you need to put, like, your third attempt may not come out so great and you want to pull it out. That's hard to do if your thread is attached to another one. So I'm going to pause the video and show you a second method for doing this stitch. Okay, so I've got a second set of loops going here. I used a variegated thread, that color changing thread for this one. So I wanted to see what that looks like. I've come back up as if I'm going to do a final loop. I'm not. I'm going to gently slide my pen out. Now I'm going to go through my tunnel. Now, instead of coming all the way back, what we're going to do with this one is we are going to put our needle back into the fabric right next to where it came. Oops, sorry about that, I had a little freeze. I'm going to put my needle back into the fabric right next to where it came out. On this one, you can see back here, my needle came out here and then came back in down here. So you can see my tacking stitch right there is pretty long. Here, my tacking stitch is going to be shorter. This one's a little bit trickier, I'm not going to lie. See if I can show this to you. I'm going to try to keep my thread on top of my tunnel like I did before. Go. Keep my little loops in a row. Oh dear. See if I can get my little loops in a row here again. There we go. Okay. Pull this down. Okay, so see how that changes the shape of the stitch. I get like this little bottom part here reminds me of a little bow tie with my little baby tacking stitch there. Okay, as opposed to this long one. So this is more of a leaf shape. This one looks more like a flower blossom to me. So that is the difference. And then again, you can come up here, you can just use the same thread and come to a straight stitch, but I am now going to show you the pistil stitch. So I'm going to knot off my thread back here. Get rid of that. I am going to use, again, embroidery floss for my pistil stitch. Pistil stitch will work with anything. If you want a really fat little pistil, I did this one here with the fat pearl cotton number 3. And this one's with skinny pearl cotton number 8. It looks really nice in a contrasting color. Now, the pistil stitch, you already know how to do it if you've been participating in class, because it is just a French knot. So I'm coming up here in the middle. And for a normal French knot, I would just wrap my thread around my needle 3 or 4 times, and I would go back into the fabric right where I came out. For the pistil stitch, same thing. I'm going to wrap my thread around my needle. I'm going to do 3 times. And instead of going in where I came out, I'm going to put my needle back in wherever I want that dot to be, where I want my little knot to be. So I'm going to go in up here. Same thing. I'm keeping this tension taut with my non-sewing hand, my left hand, and I'm pushing my needle through. Once the eye of my needle sort of gets through those knots, I'm okay to let go. And I can pull my needle through the fabric. And there is a pistil stitch. Okay, I'm gonna do that one more time. I'm gonna put another one right in here because I think it's cute to have 3. Okay, I'm gonna pull, I want this one to go off to the side. I'm gonna wrap my needle 1, 2, 3 times, and I want it to be a little lower and off to the side. So I'm just gonna stick my needle down where I want it, pull that tail taut around the needle, push down till my eye is through the knots, or at least sitting inside of them. And then I can relax over here and pull through. I'm stuck. Got it. Okay. So that is the pistil stitch. Adorable. I'll go through and put another one in here later. The pistil stitch is very, very cool. You can use it to make these little inside bits, or I'm struggling here. Where is it? You can make a full flower with it if you want to. So I have started one over here. I drew out a flower just like I did when we did our buttonhole stitch. I drew myself a little circle and drew a flower. And then I went through and added my lines. And then I went and I did, on these lines, I did a pistil stitch on all of them in pink. And I went all the way around, and then I went through with blue and just did a short one in between, just eyeballed where that one went. So lots of fun things that you can do with the pistil stitch. Makes great fireworks. Your handout has a lot of examples for this one. So that is it for today. If you want to, for homework, make some more of these, or if you have room, go ahead and make yourself a little pistil stitch flower over here, and then next week we'll give it a stem and those sticky up leaves. So that's that, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, and then after that we'll start our geometric stitch sampler. Thanks.